Welcome to Sticky, Stories That Stick. Join me, Amelia Forzak, as I sit down with master storytellers to explore what makes some narratives unforgettable. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Amelia Forzak, the host of Sticky, Stories That Stick, where I sit down with successful executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders to uncover the pivotal moments that shape them and explore what transforms personal experiences into stories that truly stick with audiences. Whether you're crafting your next keynote, writing a book, or simply want to connect more authentically with others, you'll discover the psychology behind memorable storytelling and learn how to turn your own life experiences into narratives that resonate and inspire action. Today, I have a very exciting guest with us, but first, I just have to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Pithy Wordsmithery, a Chicago-based firm founded by yours truly. I'm a New York Times bestselling ghostwriter, and I love helping people write and publish their books. My team and I have helped many authors turn their stories into bestsellers and their brands into thought leadership platforms. Our readership is in the hundreds of thousands, so even if you haven't heard of us, there's a decent chance you've read something we've written. If you've ever thought about writing a book, check us out online at pithywordsmithery.com. Today, I have Madison Fitzpatrick with me. Madison is a former engineer and management consultant who specializes in writing clear messages about complex things. She's ghostwritten more than 20 books in genres like business, communication, and personal growth. She loves working with experts, leaders, educators, and innovators to share their wisdom in a way that makes a real impact on people's lives. Madison, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Amelia. This is very exciting.
Yeah, so just so you guys know, Madison and I chat all the time because we're in a little ghostwriting group together. And so I'm super excited to have her on the show because I think she's super cool.
Oh, thanks. And actually, the truth is, I was just in Chicago for my 15-year college reunion, and I didn't have time to reach out to you, but next time I definitely will.
Yeah, we should get together. We've never actually met in person.
Right? All this online work. I haven't met most of my clients or colleagues in person, but I always try when I get the chance.
It's funny how that works, right? And I feel like, especially with ghostwriting, you're talking to somebody all the time, you get to know them so well. And then it's like, wait, but we've never really met in real life.
Yeah. I often feel closer to the people that I talk to online, especially over the course of a 6 month project. Sometimes it's a year or more. And it's always a privilege to be able to meet them in person at some point if I ever get to. And I sometimes do get to. Once in a while, a client will want to work in person or will happen to be in the same city, and it works out. But
Yeah,
the online world here in publishing.
I know. Zoom has really done a lot to make you feel close when you're not actually in the same room. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'd love to learn more about I feel like I'm like, wait, you're an engineer? I don't even think I knew that about you. I want to know about how you got into ghostwriting and just yeah, why don't we start there?
Yeah, I definitely didn't have the most typical path into this career. A lot of ghostwriters have a background in journalism, or they were an English major or communications specialist or something like that. I actually studied engineering in undergrad, and then I did a PhD in engineering, transportation engineering, if you wanted to know. And I got into ghostwriting pretty much by accident, but in hindsight, things happen for reasons, right? So, I after I finished my grad school work, I got into management consulting, which is actually pretty common for people who have advanced degrees, but they don't want to go into their field or stay in academia. Management consulting is a really great way to sort of leapfrog into the business world because they bill themselves as like brains for hire, essentially. So if you can prove that you're smart and take initiative and you know how to learn things and do things, management consulting firms want to hire you. And that's what happened to me. So I worked for one of the top consulting firms for about a year. And then personal life intervened and I got married. My husband was an immigrant who had just gotten his permission to work in the United States. And I said, you know what? I don't want to travel 4 days a week and work 60 hours a week anymore. How about you find a job wherever you can, and I'll figure something out in the meantime. And figuring something out in the meantime turned into freelance writing. which even though I wasn't like trained as a writer, I didn't take writing classes in college and things like that. I was always a big reader. Ever since, my earliest days, I was big on books, obsessed with books, spent the whole weekend holed up in my room reading books. And I think I really just learned that skill sort of through osmosis. And then some of the other things that I did later in life, like, as a grad student, you do quite a bit of literature review, like reading and synthesizing information from lots of different places, pulling it together into one single report. You do presentations. I was actually part of a program where I was teaching high school students once a week for about 2 years. So I was really having to learn these communication skills, like
Hmm.
how to take these complex ideas, boil them down, figure out what's important and how to convey them in the right order so that people who aren't experts yet can learn it. So all of those skills came together with the freelance writing, and it actually started more on the marketing side, doing some short, thought leadership pieces or writing websites or developing brand messaging, which might not sound very technical, but actually it can be really difficult to convey in a small amount of words what a company does, especially if it's something really abstract. Um, but
Yeah.
then the real the
Hard.
it copywriting is hard. It's like it seems silly because you see the final product and it's just like a sentence or something like that. But it's like, wow, yeah, we spent hours on that sentence, if not days or weeks. Um, and the jump into books actually happened with my husband. So he was a teacher. It was his first job teaching in a United States context in an American classroom. And he came home every day with stories. He was like stories about the students, about the other teachers, the administration, and his thoughts about how things could go better. His philosophy on education was really starting to come through in those conversations. And we thought, why don't we start blogging about this? This is really cool. Like, we don't really have an audience or a goal for this blog, but we just want to write this stuff down. So we did. And we did that for about 6 months, maybe 9 months. And by that time, we had a good amount of content pulled together. And he said, why don't we see if we can turn this into a book? So we took a couple months, like the summer after his first year teaching, and like tried to find the thread that tied all of these stories and separate blog posts into something coherent for teachers. And we did that and we self-published it and we had no idea what we were doing. And we did everything wrong as far as like marketing a book because we didn't know how to market a book at all. And it never went anywhere, but it was tons of fun. And we were happy with the book itself, like the result. And he was like, you know what, you're pretty good at this. Maybe you should do this for other people. And that's kind of how it got started. And it took a few years to transition from marketing to ghostwriting books, but at this point, it's 100% books for me.
That's awesome. How long have you been writing books?
Let's see. So we did our first book project together in maybe like 2019. And,
Okay.
and I did my first paid book project shortly after that, which was hilarious looking back on it. I had no idea like how to structure a book project or what to charge or anything. And I learned like a million lessons at once. Did everything wrong once again. So yeah, I guess it's been 5, 6 years since the first books, and maybe 2 years since I've gone 100% books. I don't really do any marketing work anymore unless it's like one of my authors wants to continue working with me to promote their book and stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yes, I have also transitioned to only doing books. I used to do a lot more content that was like shorter pieces and blog posts and that kind of thing. And there's just something about books that's definitely my niche, and I love like the long format of it.
I
But it
agree.
comes with its own challenges, right? Because it's a huge project that you're managing for someone. And so I figured this is a great time to chat about that. I want to know more about like how you structure the work that you do with clients. And I think that's a big question that people always have when they're thinking about working with a ghostwriter is like, well, how does it work?
Yeah. Yeah, everybody does it their own way. And my way works really well for the type of client I work with, which tends to be some kind of expert or leader, a coach maybe who wants to share their knowledge. And there's usually a good amount of personal narrative incorporated in that, but usually it's sort of a teaching type of book. Like the author's goal is to teach you how to do something, how to apply a skill, solve a problem in your life, etc. Um, so it tends to be a little bit more of a structured process than sometimes a memoir is. It's sort of a sprawling circular process to like figure out what your story is. And like there can be multiple revisions that go or rewrites. I don't do a lot of memoir partly for that reason because it can be a little messy.
Yeah.
But the short answer of how a project works with me is there are three phases. Well, okay, I'll say four phases. The first phase is the kickoff, where we have several conversations, hopefully in a short period of time. I like to do it in the space of 2 days, where we really go deep and figure out, like, what is your book even about? Who are you trying to talk to? What kind of promise are you making to them? How are you delivering on that promise? Why should they listen to you? What makes you a credible person to say these things? And what is the let's lay out all the topics and stories on the table and try to figure out what order they might go in. That's our kickoff phase. And then once we have, like, I call it a manuscript map because it gives us kind of an outline to follow. Then we can go, okay, chapter by chapter, what are all the things you want to say? And that's the interview phase. That's phase 2, where we have all these conversations. Usually, like once a week, we'll sit down on the phone or on Zoom and talk through a chapter. And so that might take, let's say, I don't know, 8 to 12 weeks, something like that. Sometimes much longer, especially when things get in the way and people, we have to push calls and things like that. But once while we're doing that interview process, I usually do one sample chapter that really sets up the book. So the author can look at that and say, okay, are we targeting, like, are we getting the main message right? Are we getting the tone right? And is it like grabbing me? Is it exciting?
Yeah.
Is it making me want to read the next chapter?
It's the vibe check, right? So like
It's the vibe check.
yeah, you're working with somebody new and you're like, okay, like show me you can really do this. And so yeah, the sample chapter, which is also helpful if you're doing a book proposal, because that's one of the things that you need to submit as part of the book proposal. So that's why a lot of times ghostwriters do it first. But yes, you do the vibe.
Yeah.
They like it, of course. And
If
then
they love it. And then once we're done with the interviews, so not everybody does this. I actually go and do the whole first draft I do not deliver it chapter by chapter. And we could talk about the pros and cons.
yes, you do that different. Cause like when you first told me that, I was like, I'm sorry, what?
That's crazy. No.
I do it chapter by chapter. I want to get buy-in as we go and like chip away and just like cross it out. I literally like I cross it out on like a spreadsheet and it feels good. And so I do it that way. But so you also, I don't love editing. I want to get it like right.
Right the first time.
I have a really clean first draft and I go slower with it. And I think, don't you like you knock it out faster and then you do more in the editing. So it's like pushed, it's like just a different.
It kind of depends. I actually don't like editing either. And I always try to get it as right as possible in that first draft.
Yeah.
But the reason I don't do chapter by chapter anymore, I did it some at the beginning, but what I found was that for the author, it kind of kicks them into this loop where like they're thinking, like from an interview perspective, I want them to be thinking about the next chapter that we're going to talk about. But if I deliver them a chapter based on something we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago, now their mind is in the wrong place.
Interesting.
They're thinking about the wrong topic, and then they start going into revision mode when I still want them to be in like the creative download mode. And it's not a problem for everyone, but I have had multiple cases where the project gets really hung up on those early chapters. And in a lot of those cases, it would have been solved if we had just waited, because the author was, what happens for a lot of people, and this even happens on the first read through if they have the full draft in front of them, is as they read, they're thinking, oh, but I want to say this, but I want to say that. What about this? What about that? And it's like, it's coming. It's in the next chapter. It's on the next page. Like, it's there. You just haven't gotten there yet. And as an author, you kind of know what should be there. And so your mind is jumping ahead in a way that a naive reader who doesn't live in your brain wouldn't jump ahead, right?
Mhm.
So not only do I deliver the whole first draft at once, but I also tell the author, read it once without touching it. Don't open your Word document. Don't pick up a pencil. Just read it once. Because
Okay.
then you get the full picture of what's there. And when you go back to start making your comments about what you want to revise, you have a much better understanding of what needs to be added or not.
Mm-hmm.
So
Interesting.
anyway, that's my take on it. And that's why the sample chapter is so important, because I do need to get that buy-in from the author early on. And I don't want them to be freaking out like, oh my God, what if she sends me this whole draft and it's all garbage? Like I definitely don't want that to happen. And it never really does, you know? Um, so those were the kickoff is phase one, the content is phase two, the writing is phase three, which like the author gets to take a little break and like go on vacation from the project for a few weeks. And then we come back and do revisions. That's phase four. And I kind of try to organize it into one round of revisions. It's for deep cuts, moving big things around, adding chunks of content, really making serious changes. And then the second round of revisions is just let's polish the language, make sure it flows, make sure we are consistent throughout. Like if there's a framework or there are lists, there's like things that sometimes get changed. It'll say 8 over here and 7 over there. We want to make sure it's all correct. So, and then it's ready to be handed off to a publisher or a hybrid publishing partner.
Yeah. Or self-publishing as we help.
Exactly. Or self-publishing. Yeah.
Yeah, all good options for sure.
Yeah.
So when you're writing the book, um, so you're delivering the whole thing at once. So maybe this doesn't matter as much, but I know when I'm ghostwriting for people, I sort of cherry pick the chapters. I start with whatever I think is the easiest one first, usually from somewhere in the middle of the book, because I think that like there's always you got to get up to speed, right? And like learn how to work with each other. And it's easiest to start with an easy chapter. And I usually find like the beginning of the book and the ending to be like the hardest. So I do those parts last. I'll usually start from the middle. And if there are chapters where I'm like, could the author sit down and just talk about this tomorrow? Like, do they know exactly what they want to say? We start there and then we start filling in the middle. And then at the end, we talk through the preface, the intro, chapter one, and then I do like the end chapter. What's your process like? Do you write in a linear way or?
I am much more linear. And it's another one of those totally legitimate debates. There's no wrong way to do it. I know a lot of writers will say, I write the introduction last. You should write the introduction last, because then you really know what the book is about. I'm kind of the opposite. I actually believe that I need to write the introduction first, because if I don't know what the book is really about, I'm not ready to write it. And
Mm.
that's why I always do the introduction as a sample chapter, because I want to make sure we're setting it up correctly and we are speaking to the right audience and we are reeling them in right from the start. And that we're making the right promise at the beginning of the book that we're then going to deliver on with the rest of the manuscript. Um, it it might not be the easiest way, but
Mhm.
to me, it's kind of like an investment of the intellectual work at the beginning to make sure we know what the heck we're doing. Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I I always package as part of my beginning work the back jacket copy. So
yeah,
it's similar, it's like similar to the introduction in that you're setting up like what's the book going to be about? Who's it for? Why do people need it now? Why is the author the best person to tell the story? But that's like to me the North Star. But yeah, you have to have that. Otherwise, you're like, what are we even doing? I feel like
Yeah.
that's like the problem that a lot of people get in when people who aren't professional writers or maybe they haven't done it before, they set out to write a book and they just start writing because it feels good. And it's like
Mhm.
therapeutic and they're telling a story, but as they're writing it, they like don't really know where it's gonna go in the book or just all the details. And so they end up with a bunch of writing without having that outline and the strategy first. And that's where
Yeah.
we end up with these messy manuscripts where they're like, we need help editing. And it's like would have been easier to just ghostwrite the whole thing from scratch for me than to untangle it. But
Yeah, that can definitely happen. And it reminds me of a project where I an author came to me knowing that he wasn't quite ready to start the book because he wasn't quite sure what it was about, but he felt that there was a book in him, in his work. Um, and so what we did was instead of the process I just described, which is very linear and is very efficient, we said, okay, we're just going to blog on a weekly basis for several months. And it actually turned into like 6 months of we get on a call once a week. We'd talk through something for 60, 90 minutes. I would draft like, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 words on what we talked about, and we would publish it the following week. And we just did that for almost 6 months until we felt like we were running out of things to say. And then we pulled together this 6 months worth of stuff and said, okay, like where's the book in this?
Mhm.
And we did find a book, but it wasn't like, okay, blog post number 5 and then
Oh,
number 12 and then number 7. Like, yeah, right, I wish, right? We had to go through this like messy thinking process to help him figure out what his book even was. And then we kind of had to start at the beginning with all that material just to figure out like what the structure of the book would be. And maybe 50% of the book ended up being heavily based on that blog material, but there was a lot left to fill in the gaps for the whole thing to make sense. And honestly, like I track all my time on all my projects, even when it's a flat fee project, just because I like to know how long it ends up taking. And that was one of the longest ones in terms of total hours to generate the book. And what that says to me, like what it should say to anyone who's interested in writing a book, is that the more clarity you have in the moment you decide to start writing about what you're really trying to say, the more efficient and structured you can be. But if you're not clear, and it's okay to not be clear, you should expect to spend some time writing in circles. It's gonna happen because that's how you figure out what you're trying to say.
yes, I call that building the plane as you're flying it. And I've done that.
Maybe not efficient.
Yeah, it's funny because that is one of the factors for me that helps me figure out how much work the project's going to be when I'm partnering with an author is how developed their thought leadership is. That's how we say it, right? So it's
Yes.
like, have you been teaching on this for 10 years? Have you been giving workshops on this? Have you coached on this? Do you have white papers and case studies and blog posts? Like, if this has been what you've been talking about and doing keynotes on and interviews for years and years, your thought leadership is well developed. If you've been, I mean, maybe you've been doing this, but you're exploring lots of different things and you're still trying to figure out like what the through line is, or it's like a newer business or a newer like career transition or something like that, it is harder to figure out like, okay, of the existing material that's out there, is there a through line? What can be used? Um, I work with a lot of authors who have, I call it like a content library when they have all that existing stuff. And
Mhm.
sometimes people come and this has probably happened to you where they're like, I want to take all my podcasts or all my blog posts and turn it into a book. And like you said, it's not that easy. Like what I think works better is if you can sit down with the author, talk through everything, figure out what their goals are, who like how the book aligns with future revenue streams and like the target market that they want to be dealing with in 5 to 10 years and what they want to be doing. Figure out what makes sense for the book with all that, and then look to see what content they have that can fit into that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it, when I actually recently republished a blog post I developed a couple years ago that addresses the question of how long it takes to write a book,
Mm.
right? Which obviously it depends on how long it is and how many hours a day you're going to dedicate to it. But even beyond that, there are factors that will make it take more hours or less hours, regardless of how you divide those hours over the course of a year or whatever. And one of the biggest factors is like, have you been communicating about whatever it is that you think your book is going to be about? Because if it's all in your head and you've never talked about it or shared it, then you don't know yet how to say whatever. You might not even know what you're trying to say yet. And I did have a project. This is the longest chronological time that it has taken between the start of a book project, which it was early 2021 when the project started, and it is going to be published next month.
Mm.
So that's almost 5 years. And it wasn't 5 years of like continuously every single week this person was working on their book. It was, we started to do that linear structured process, but there were many starts and stops, many moments of second guessing, many extended breaks from the project, precisely because this person was not sure what he wanted to say.
I think I know who we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of clients like that as well. So that's I guess one of the biggest tips is like, if you are trying to write a book and you're not completely sure where your thought leadership lives and what you want to say, you might not be ready, because that does cause you to second guess yourself, or you create an outline and maybe that's not the outline you want. And all that's really difficult. I'm working with a client right now who hired me to do a couple chapters for her, sample chapters for an outline that she made. And then when I last talked to her, she said, "This isn't the book I want."
Yeah.
And so it's like,
So sometimes when somebody comes to me and they say they want to write a book, they're not super clear in that first conversation about what it's going to be about. I say, let's do the manuscript map. It's like the 2-day kickoff process. Because if we can't get clear in those 2 full days about what your book is, then that will tell you how, like, if you're ready to start or not ready to start.
yeah.
In some cases, I've had people come out of that and say, I actually have 2 books in my head.
Oh
And
yeah.
now I know that they're 2 separate ideas and this one comes first and I'll do this one later. Like, or they'll come out and say, you know what, there is an idea here, but I'm not that excited about sharing it. So maybe not. Like that sometimes happens with a memoir,
Yeah.
where someone feels like they have a really important or compelling story to share, but maybe they're not emotionally ready to spend like hours and hours every week, like deep in that story. Like maybe it was painful for them and they're not ready to go back there. Or I even had somebody say, she put a lot of time into thinking about and outlining her memoir. And then she realized that it was just an invitation to get sued and that she was never going to be able to publish it if she didn't want to spend the rest of her life fighting lawsuits.
God.
So it's there are lots of different paths to write a book, and some people are lucky. I mean, I guess I would call it lucky that, or they're fortunate that their message is very clear in their minds. So from the moment they decide to write a book, it can be a matter of, I don't know, a couple of months, like 3 to 6 months, you could get a book done if you really know what you're trying to say and how you want to say it. Other people spend years trying to figure out what they're trying to say.
Yeah. I think that having some accountability and having the actual like project going with a timeline helps people commit. I talk to a lot of people who you probably get this all the time too, Madison, where they're like, I've had this book in my head for 10 years or longer, right? And if you can actually like sit down, map it out, figure out what makes the most sense, what you're interested in talking about, and then commit to going that way, it helps it go faster. But yeah, it's interesting because you never really know what you're going to get sometimes with clients until you start working with them.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people, especially today. I get a lot of people asking me, like, what do you think about AI? Can you write a book with AI? And we could talk about the quality of the writing that comes out of any given and any given chatbot. But even beyond the quality of writing, the benefit of working with a human collaborator, whether it's a ghostwriter, an editor, a book coach, or whatever it is you do have some accountability, you do have some structure, and you do have some feedback. And the feedback is so important because it's so easy to get lost in your own head when you're doing this all by yourself. And you start to, think in circles or doubt the value of what you're trying to say, doubt your own credibility and your right to say it. Like there are all kinds of ways to get stuck when you're doing this by yourself.
Yeah, that happens to everyone too. It always amazes me because I guess naturally, like, oh, I'm in the how-to genre as well. I mostly do the business books and that kind of thing. But these are experts who are writing these books. These are people who have taught on these things or like, they're at the top of the field for whatever that niche thing is. And a lot of them are super smart. They, like Ivy League business school people, like people who get paid a lot of money to consult on this or speak on this. And then when they're in the thick of writing the book, it's always like, do you think people care about this? Do you think and I'm like, yes, people care about this. Is that imposter syndrome creeps in for everyone. I found that to be so interesting with like some of these people who I feel like are at the top of their game, most successful, and still have those moments where they wonder if anyone cares and they should even be doing this.
Yeah, everybody gets hung up, especially on like, is this new? Is this original? Like, who needs another book on this topic? Everybody said it before. And I actually find that very comforting. Like, everything under the sun has been done before. So, like, let's do it again. Like, what does it matter? You don't have to be brand new and original in every respect. Like, just the sheer combination of like an idea with your perspective, your experience, your stories for your audience, it's going to be fresh in that way, even if you're recycling theories or practices that have been around for decades or even thousands of years. I mean, I just finished a manuscript with these two co-authors um, who, I mean, if you really break down, it's really a personal growth book. It's about how to live a better life. How many of those do we have? Like we can, they're probably in the thousands just in the ones that were published in the last year, right? And if you really break down everything in their book, like none of it is new. Most of it is from like Stoicism or Zen Buddhism, or it can be traced back to like very far, right? It's all been said before, but not the way they said it. And I know that there are going to be people who will read their book who have never read anything about Stoicism in their lives, who have never heard anything about Zen Buddhism in their lives. And so they're going to get those nuggets of wisdom from these guys instead.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Yeah. Yep, I totally agree with you. And I hope that's inspiring for people who are scared about if their idea matters or if if they have stories that are worth telling, where it's like, absolutely you do. Like I always like to think about the book. I don't know if you've ever read Steal Like an Artist, but
No, I haven't, but I've heard of it, yeah.
it's great. It just talks about how like even if you copy other people on purpose, the way that you like use that idea that you love, but you tell your own story through it, or it never looks the same, right? It's very hard to like really copy copy someone like that. And so it's like you're using it as inspiration. You're drawing inspiration from all these places and you're making it your own. And it is new. The thing that comes out is new because it's a collection of all your different things that have inspired you.
Yeah,
So,
that's totally true.
yeah. So tell me more. What are some of your most interesting partnerships that you've had for ghostwriting? Like what makes a good client for you?
Um, Honestly, I don't know how to answer that. But I will tell you that one of the interesting things I've been thinking about lately is the two projects that are very different. Two projects that I'm currently working on that are very different in terms of reach. And I think this might be something interesting for people to hear about because people often get hung up on like, do I have a big enough audience for my book? Like, is it worth it to write a book if I can only get it to, a few people, or like if it's not a bestseller, then I don't want to do it if it's not going to be a bestseller and that type of thing. I have one client who, in our earliest conversations, he said, I did the math and the true like pinpoint target audience for this book might be like 50 people.
Yeah.
And you might find a few hundred, maybe a few thousand who would find it relevant, but like if I could get this book in the hands of these 50 people, it would
Mm-hmm.
be a huge win. And that's how niche the book is. And it's how valuable those people are to this author. Like if he
That's
could,
what that was my question. I was like, can I ask that? I don't know if that would be giving too many details away, but say your whole business is based on connecting with these 50 people. And that's like your difference between being able to scale your business and like do everything you want in life and not.
yes, that's exactly what, if he got one client from this book, it would make the whole investment in the book worth it because that's the type of business he's in. It's a high ticket business and he is potentially going to sell his business sometime in the near future, and having that book gives his business extra credibility for any potential buyer who might be interested. It strengthens his brand. So
Mhm.
it strengthens the whole value of his business. And so just having this book, even if he didn't directly get a new client from it, is probably worth a significant amount of future revenue. So that's the super, super niche guy. Then I have these other authors who I think it's very likely that their book is going to sell millions of copies. Not only because it is applicable to virtually everyone. And I know, like, you never want to say your target audience is everyone, but like in many cases, there's a book that, it doesn't have a niche application. It's an everyday life application. So their book could help virtually anyone. And they have the credibility, the marketing skills, the network, and the past experience with book marketing to potentially blow this up, right? Both of these people made the same investment in the collaboration process. Both of these people, we did the same basic thing. We wrote two different books, but we went through the same process. And I just thought that was so interesting that and hopefully we'll get people out of that mindset of like, I need to have a bestseller. I need to sell tons of copies for my book to be successful. Because it can be that, but it certainly doesn't have to be.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people are thinking that they know they want the book to be an investment and they're thinking about it in terms of how many copies are they going to sell. And most of the clients that we're working with, Madison, are people who are using it as a marketing piece for their brand or business. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like selling copies is great, absolutely. And it'd be nice if you could kind of like recoup at least part of your investment from selling the copies. But more importantly, if you're booking speaking engagements where you're making thousands of dollars per speaking engagement, or you're getting in front of new clients and then you have more business coming in through your other services, or if you're trying to sell your business or you want to get on boards, there's so many reasons why boosting your credibility and having the book help. And when you're thinking about it that way, it's almost more important, like for marketing, to use the book to boost the credibility instead of being like copies, sell copies, sell copies.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of speaks to, what makes a great client for me. A great client for any book collaborator is somebody who is clear about the value of their book, who is clear about what they want to achieve with it, and is realistic about that, you know? Um, every everybody wants their book to be a bestseller, but the reality is, and to be perfectly honest, there's sort of a formulaic way to become like an Amazon bestseller. There are lots of people who claim that you can just pay them and they'll do whatever it takes to be an Amazon bestseller. And that's nice, but it's not the same as being a New York Times bestseller or a Wall Street Journal bestseller. But the reality is that bestseller status, like, what does it really mean? What do you think it's going to do for you? And I think one of the things that uh, is a red flag for me for a client, to speak to the opposite of what's a good client, is somebody who's too hung up on that, because that's only a small piece. Like, how many copies you sell is only a small piece of the value you get out of creating a book, whether it's financial value, emotional value, like whatever value you get out of it. If you're really focused on the copies you sell, that's a red flag for me, for sure.
Yeah. It's tricky to even project sales numbers like that. So much of it, because sometimes when I'm on a sales call, people are like, "Well, how many books do you think I can sell?" And it's like so much of it depends on just like the marketing that the author's willing to do in general, right? The platform they
Exactly, yeah.
and
I
that
know having a quality manuscript is certainly a prerequisite for having a highly successful book that sells lots of copies, but it's not enough. You can write a great book and no one will ever see it if you don't know how to market it. And that's a whole other conversation. Writing a book is one thing. Marketing a book it's another game. It's another set of expertise. And there are some very weird things that happen in the book industry that, like, you have to be aware of. It's not the same as marketing any other product.
yeah. Marketing is a lot for sure. That's we do a bit of marketing at Pithy Wordsmithery, and we also partner with other companies for certain aspects of it, to outsource, just because there are so many things you can do for marketing, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I think for authors, it helps the most if by the time the book comes out, they already have quite a bit of momentum and they already have their own marketing capabilities in-house, where there's like already an engine running and the book can sort of just like fit into that instead of
Mhm.
trying to like all of a sudden start marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've had a lot of hard conversations with people, especially when they want to get a book deal with a traditional publisher, and they want to go through that process of writing a proposal and selling the proposal to a publisher. And inside that proposal, you have to show, like, what's your platform, what's your network, what's your plan, are you really going to be capable of selling this book? Because from a publisher's perspective, it's a risky investment and they're only going to invest in the ones that seem like a fairly sure thing.
Yeah.
I mean, publishing has changed a lot and continues to change pretty rapidly, with technology, with, all the things that have happened in the digital world. And they're getting more risk averse and less willing to invest, particularly marketing dollars,
Oh,
into
absolutely.
unproven authors who have never sold before. And it's a tough, tough world. And if you come into the idea of publishing a book with that perspective of like, I'm going to get a book deal and I'm going to be a bestseller and that's why I'm doing this, slow down.
Yeah.
Maybe think it through. Maybe make sure you have deeper reasons for pursuing a book project before you put a lot of effort or money into it.
Well, I think a lot of that is just like the ego part of it. And it's hard to, everyone thinks like it would be nice to be a bestseller. It would be nice to have a New York Times bestselling book, but you don't need that to have your book be successful and have the project be meaningful. And so I think even self-publishing has has really come a long way just because the publishing industry doesn't have as many advantages as it used to have, where people are even people who could get book deals are deciding to go a different route just because they can maintain control of the project, or maybe they just
Yeah.
aren't getting enough out of it to justify giving away that much of like the copyright and the royalty and all that. So
Yeah, yeah. And I find that so interesting when you see people who really do have a platform, people who have built up an email list, who have a social, who have people ready to buy their book from them, and they could leverage that to go get a book deal from a traditional publisher. They're looking at the deals that they're getting offered and saying, you know what? Like, this isn't really a good deal. This is not like I could do this on my own. I could keep full ownership and full control of the project. I could keep all the royalties if I just put a little money in up front. And I find that very interesting. Like I said, I'm not a writer by training. I don't come from the inside of the publishing world. I'm kind of an outsider. And so when I start seeing these things, like I find it fascinating. And I think it really speaks to continued movement in the publishing industry. Like like whatever we're seeing this year, like maybe it'll be different next year. Maybe the deals will continue evolving and the terms will continue to change. But for right now, I'm certainly seeing like people are not as impressed with the support that publishers are able to offer.
yeah, definitely. Self-publishing is taking off a ton. Um, I've worked with, I don't know, I think I've probably published with like 12 different publishing houses, and then also had a ton of authors self-publish. We've had people who definitely could have gotten a book deal, chose not to do it. We've had people who published with a publisher in the past and said they never do it again, which I always think is interesting when people have tried it and they're like, not doing that again. Um,
I had an author get two competing offers from different publishers. One was from a big five house, and one was from a much smaller, more specialized publisher. And he had every intention of going with the big five author or publisher until he got in the final meeting with them and really saw what was on the table. And he was like, wow, this isn't actually a great offer. No thanks.
yeah.
And he ended up going with the smaller, more niche publisher, primarily because they were able to move faster,
Mm.
and get the book out quicker, which was more valuable to him than having to sit around waiting for another year or two, only to like have to do all the work himself anyway, right? So it was a very interesting like twist there at the end.
The timeline thing is tricky. I had an author, co-authors actually, where I finished writing the whole book and they pitched it to publishers. They had a couple people interested. They ended up signing with a good publisher, but they were like, it'll be out in 2 years. So then they had to wait 2 years for it to come out, which is
Yeah.
crazy because when we do self-publishing for authors, our standard timeline is 16 weeks. And so that's a big difference. And if you're with a hybrid, it's usually like somewhere in the middle. But if you can keep all your royalties, maintain complete control, and have the book look professional and have it come out in a few months, that's worth that's like usually like a pretty good deal for some people. So
Yeah, and it's yeah, there are certain limitations in terms of like, can you get access to bookshelf space? Like, can you get in physical bookstores? But the reality is that too is like, even if you have a book deal with a traditional publisher, there's no guarantee that they're going to go out because it's a huge investment for them to go out pitching bookstores on your behalf is a lot of work. And bookstores are, you know, obviously extremely picky about what they put on their shelves because their shelf space is so limited and the number of books being published today is so huge. So, you know, even if there's a huge amount of like over expectation that authors tend to have of what they'll get from a book deal.
yeah, yeah. I had a New York Times bestseller that was published by a big publishing house, and you couldn't even get that book in every bookstore. Like I was
Mhm.
like, oh, it's going to be available everywhere now.
No.
No, it just,
Yeah.
and then I have a self-published book right now that's in an airport, which is like usually
Which
like
is
people are like, you're never going to get that, but
Well, apparently it's a pay to play space. So, like these are the things that you don't know until you know.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I don't even think this guy paid for it. It's like it's just a smaller airport, but I think they
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah. And like you never know, like if you have local bookstores, independent bookstores, maybe you could get your book on the shelf there, even if it's self-published. Like there,
yeah.
the it's not as simple and clean cut as it used to be. It used to be if you didn't have a traditional publisher, you were a loser, right?
This was like a
Now,
yeah, and, like, now it's like you're making a smart business choice and you're not being led by ego. It's kinda like, should you do the name brand or should you get the thing that's, like, exactly the same, but
exactly, exactly. And the two projects that I was talking about earlier, the one that's very niche and the one that could sell millions of copies, those guys who might sell millions of copies, guess what they're doing? They're working with a hybrid publisher because they know they're going to do all the marketing work anyway.
Mhm.
And they want to keep the royalties, they want to keep the control.
Yeah. So many options. That's why authors are so confused, but,
It
um
is. And that's why it's so helpful. Like, even if you don't work with a full-on ghostwriter to do your whole manuscript for you, it is so worth it to invest a little bit in some professional guidance because the publishing world is not self-explanatory.
Yeah. And what works for one person might not be the right fit for someone else. There's no one right answer for everything and really just depends on your goals and all kinds of different things. So, yes, talking with an expert is always good.
Yeah.
Um, Madison, I have loved chatting with you. This is
I
great.
feel like the time has flown.
Yeah, it definitely has. You've had a ton of experience ghostwriting, and it's always nice for me to chat with other ghostwriters. I always think that's fun.
Yeah.
Can you tell people where, if they want to learn more about you and stay connected, how can they do that?
Of course, yeah. My website is madisonfitzpatrick.com. That's Madison with one D, Fitzpatrick with a Z. It's pretty straightforward. And if you go there, you'll see a little bit about my services, but I would recommend clicking on the free guide button. I've got three free guides that you can, just download one, download all of them. But I think they're all really helpful for anybody who's thinking about writing a book, especially if you've never done it before.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, this is Madison Fitzpatrick, and I'm Amelia Forzak with Pithy Wordsmithery, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Stories That Stick. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.